We have two demo lessons that are from, actual sort of K-12 classrooms or elementary or secondary classrooms. So if you click on all class reports at the very top left of your screen, there we go, that will bring us back to sort of your landing page. And if you haven't explored the demo lessons, you can see there's a button right there. Now, I said there are two. There is a third one. That is a lesson or a class that was facilitated by our Director of Professional Learning, David Brazier, who some of you might know. And so that's with adults or with graduate students. So if you see here on the first one at the top is Analyzing the Dinosaur. That's a literary text. And so the lesson is about students really exploring the features of a text. If you can go back, actually. There we go. And then below that, we have a new one, which is really pertinent, maybe something you're actually working on with students or students at your school are working on, which is evaluating information from online sources. And in this case, it's a science classroom and the topic is wildfires. So the first case, looking at text features in a literary text, and then looking at online sources using a protocol together. I will also preface that even though it is called The Dinosaur, you'll notice it's in quotations because it's actually a very, 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 very short story by an author named Augusto Monterroso called The Dinosaur, which is one of my favorites. So if you'll click into that, we can, now we have shifted a few things around. So if you have used TeachFX in the past, you might notice that the very first thing you see when you click into a report is not the talk ratios anymore, but the word cloud. And the reason for that is because the word cloud has, since it was developed, has been the most popular insight for all of the partners and teachers that I work with. It is the first place many teachers go to look because it helps remind them of the lesson. It's almost like a visual of what took place. But there's also a lot of great information or insights that we can derive from this. I'm really curious if you have any observations that you can make as we look at the contrast between the red teacher talk. Sorry, I'm hovering over my screen. The red teacher talk on the left. That is actually me. This is my lesson. And the student talk on the right in blue. Do we see quite more differences or more similarities between the two word clouds? Jill wonders if, or states that the red teacher talk looks like it might be more directions, me giving the students directions. I take no offense at all because I'm a learner just like my students. But I will say, as I look back at this word cloud, I have a little regret. And that regret is that I was not modeling the academic vocabulary that I expected my students to use. So on the right, you'll see that they were using the features of plot, a story plot, conflict, climax, exposition, rising action. But we don't see it reflected in my speech to the extent, at least, that I planned for. And so that's something I'm hoping to remedy in the future lessons, which is if I want them to use those words, I need to use them. And I need to use them in ways that are flexible and dynamic. So that gave me a lot of insights there. So Heather points out, it's actually great your students are using the words that you're not. I agree. And these were an amazing group of students. And so that was fantastic to see them really exercising, their vocabularies and their connections to these words. Again, as a teacher, though, I do want to be that model. And so this was a great push for me to remember, Deborah, you have to use those words. And sometimes it's as easy as putting it on a Post-it for myself. We have another question from Mary Ann about the word cloud. Actually, Nicole might be able to chime in here because she is part of the team that helps really bring this word cloud to life. And that is, does the size of the word indicate frequency?
Yes. So words that are said more frequently will be larger here, and words that are said frequently enough to make it to the word cloud, but less frequently are smaller here. Yeah. And so you can see that the teacher here used the word story many times, and the students used dinosaur, climax, awoke many times.
Let's scroll down and look at one more insight. And we'll go to that timeline. There we go. So here's another really great insight from TeachFX. If you look at this particular lesson, I want us to think about checking for understanding. How often do you check for understanding or hope that your teachers do? Heather says every 5 to 10 minutes in some way. Now, if you see it differently, if it should be more frequent, please chime in the chat or aloud. But let's take a look at, let's use that framework, every 5 to 10 minutes or so. And now let's look at my lesson. Was I checking for understanding? And I am going to assume that checking for understanding means teacher talk and then student talk, right? Because I'm asking them to clarify or explain something back to me. If you were to assess my checking for understanding performance here, or give me feedback on it, am I checking for understanding enough? Are there points where maybe I should have checked for understanding because it looked like I went over the 5 or 10 minutes? Chris, can you expand on that?
So in looking at checking for understanding, it's very fluid, dependent upon what type of activities students are engaged in class. If we find that if students are deeply engaged in kind of whether it's turn and talk or some type of activity where the students are doing group work, consistently having a teacher unfortunately reinsert themselves to check for understanding in a meaningful way can break up kind of the flow. But if you have dedicated points where the students know you're going to stop, check, realign, realign what they're going to do, and then kind of keep guiding them going towards the right path, I think that's what we hope to optimize when we have any type of interactions with the students, when we look at planning and lessons and all of that when we get there, so that we have kind of a intro where we find out what students know, then we have kind of activity and work, development of understanding, and then a summative or exit ticket at the end.
Yes, thank you. I concur. And I really appreciate that you mentioned it is something that you want to plan for, and maybe your curriculum has very specific summatives or exit ticket ideas. Or maybe they even have, as the curriculums I worked with, have checking for understanding questions, and they're indicated by a check. But we also want to be flexible and respond to our students. And so if we're looking at them and seeing that they're not responding or they're not indicating in some way their engagement, that we are intervening to check for understanding. And when I look at this lesson, again, I have a pang of regret, which is that there is a very large chunk of teacher talk there about maybe, I don't know, 1/3 of the way through the lesson. And again, that to me is a really easy place. It makes me want to go back and go, why didn't I, if I was giving really important information to the students, possibly new information, right? Maybe I was describing something complex. Like, how do you know what is rising action and when it reaches the climax in a literary text? I wish I had checked for understanding at that point. And so again, here's an easy way for me to look at, to use TeachFX insights to see whether I am making those teacher moves that are important to student engagement, to student learning. This is why TeachFX is designed for the teacher. Right? This is not designed for an administrator to come in and go, oh, well, she's not checking for understanding at certain points. This is my lesson. And you're completely right. I might very well, as indicated by that silence, have asked the students to, in this case, draw out what a plot map looks like. And I could have checked for understanding by looking for their text. But I just wanted to give you one idea about how people are using this.